Usually, they say ladies first, but I thought on the contrary today, because Robert, you were actually the first man on the stage today. Any reflections, any takeaways from today's sessions?
Yeah, having spent a career in the nonprofit sector, I'm newly impressed with the private sector and your ability to do good in the world. I think the values that have been discussed here, not only by Nederman, but by the companies that you've had coming in and presenting their commitment to sustainability and the depth of their commitment to sustainability has been inspiring for me. So that's in a general perspective. Yeah.
Right.
In a more substantive perspective, I think some of your new products are really interesting. I think the notion of having air monitoring equipment on your products that automatically reports and allows you to do servicing could be really a fascinating development, particularly in developing economies where technical capability, follow-through, enforcement is really limited. And I think that could be a real contribution. So I find that to be a very exciting part of what you offered today in your presentation.
Connie, I labeled you a constructive optimist. Or can I still label you a constructive optimist?
Well, for sure, there are really, really many good solutions. Yet, I have the feeling that sometimes I'm not sure that we are getting the examples, the story, that we're getting it out there as fast as we could and as fast as we probably should. Because I think that what we also heard today, I mean, that the whole power shift that is happening in the world, and we could of course just say, yeah, that's how it is, and 5 billion in Asia and China and what have we. Still, I have this belief that we have something to offer in the European way of doing things. So at least we can slow down this inevitable sort of geostrategic shift by being even more innovative, even better at getting things to scale, and even better at doing what is normally what we are really good at in the Nordic region, to work together, the business, the policy area, and enlightened citizens. And I think we have something unique there where sort of the pendulum is swinging back. It's not just market, or huge regulation there. There are some new forms where I think if we are smart, then we can take the next steps in a much more cooperative way. And that's why some of the other kind of systems, they will not be able to do it in a cooperative manner. They will not be able to carry the citizens. But that is a big task we have, and I think that politics and business will have to work together if that is to be a success.
And how do they work together?
Well, I think we have a tradition. For instance, if you take the way we do our labor market regulation in the Nordics, there you would normally have consultations or three-party, whatever. I mean, right now in Denmark, the new social democratic government has said we will go 70% reduction in CO2 and sustainability and here and there, and all very good. Today, the Confederation of Danish Industry has its annual meeting, and they are embracing this, which nobody would have thought of only 3 months ago, this very ambitious targets. And they came out yesterday with 150 very specific proposals. Here are some barriers that could be removed. This is what we need. This is what we could do ourselves. And I think that is the Nordic way. And if we really manage to include citizens, active citizens, the consumers, all the good forces out there, we could, contrary to many others, we could show that you can make this transition that we need with people and democracy still there, instead of having this polarization, the increased inequality, and all the things that are threatening our basic core values. I think if any region in the world could make the transitions we need for many reasons in the decades to come, it's the Nordic region, because we have a tradition of creating communities, and we have something there to build on. But it takes something from all of us to reach out and not just focus on our own narrow business.
The Nordic strategy.
Could be.
Yeah. Anders, what are your main takeaways from today's sessions?
Well, I would be in agreement with an optimistic view on the Nordic region. This is a region where you have a fundamental leaning towards engineering industries. We and the kind of, if you call it the extended German production zone with Central Eastern Europe, the Netherlands, the Nordic countries, where engineering is a core of industry and manufacturing, I think we will be able to adapt. I'm more worried of Europe as a whole, I must say. We have two different technologies that are now accelerating, and that's AI and telecommunication. And it's pretty clear that 5G is now coming in the US. It's not coming in Europe. The Commission has been unable to transform our teleco regulation. So Vodafone is running 120 million subscribers on 17 different networks, while Verizon is doing that on one network. We are a third of the Chinese 5G investments here in Europe, and 5G is basically about producing data. Everything will be connected, and the data growth will be very, very strong. And that's very important because we're heading towards AI, and AI is about data. And Europe is kind of falling behind on 5G and AI quite heavily. And so I'm not that optimistic that technological leadership will be in Europe. If anything, it's moving towards the US and towards Asia. So we have the engineers here in the north, but the rest of Europe slightly more
They do something differently. They drink coffee.
Coffee is very nice. I
Yeah.
love coffee.
Yeah. Sven, your reflections.
No, I think it's very interesting to listen to, and also the constructive Danish optimism and the politicians. And what I would say that maybe Kerstin and myself, we have to embrace more the political side of it and being more open, not just sitting and more on the Friday drink and say that what are the politicians, why are they not acting? So maybe we have to be more active in presenting, as Robert is saying, there are solutions and we have them, and maybe we are like reactive engineers waiting for someone to find out that we have the solutions. Maybe we have to be better in sort of presenting it in different areas.
I think on that point, there's an ability, you look at what's going on now with the deregulatory environment in the US, and I think there's a real opportunity for industry certainly to be a moderating factor there. Certainly the bureaucracy, the career employees in the environmental agencies act as leverage or as ballast, really. But I think industry is in a very unique position to be able to go in and talk about the importance of consistency and regulation, the importance of predictability and efficiency and larger values. And we see that recently, of all companies, Volkswagen joining with Ford, joining with BMW, and joining with Honda in siding with the state of California in favor of vehicle efficiency standards that are in businesses' interest because they're in a global marketplace, but also are in the interest of the environment. And they were able to speak to government on that. They took some heat for that, but I think that was a courageous step, and I think that's somewhat in line with what you're talking about.
Connie, you want to say something?
Yeah, it was just one thing on this 5G and our capacity in Europe to sort of scale and move and do the research and bring it into production fast enough. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I really like the market and the tender and all this, but maybe we're also sometimes just too naive. I mean, look at this whole thing about Huawei. And you know, we just sort of put out our tenders, and then somebody comes with a bid, and where the cheapest option wins. Now I'm simplifying it, and we are giving away harbor infrastructure. In Denmark, we sold away our key infrastructure to Huawei. I mean, sometimes we're maybe also a bit naive, where we need to sort of get some other components into our decision making when we are making choices. And I think that we could pool our research forces much more in Europe. We have a huge EU budget. Of course, it's only 1% of our combined GDP and all this. But if we did a few things where we said, here we really want to be the ones to get this, take batteries or whatever. but identified a few areas where we said, here we will try to become the world champions. I'm sure if we worked better together, more coordinated, we could bring it to scale faster instead of sitting a bit naive and waiting for somebody else to buy their strategic interest into our domain.
So maybe transfer some of the agricultural support from that sector to IT.
That could be an idea. If you take care of Macron on this, I'll take care of the rest.
Exactly, yeah, I'll call him tonight. But Kerstin, you refer to legislation as a possibility for your business.
Yeah. So in our world, it would have been, exporting to 90 countries. It's a nightmare with all the local legislation. So a global harmonized system would be a dream. And if they would ban solvent-borne products, would also be a blessing, because then we could double our business. So that would also be nice. But at minimum, a harmonized legislative system. It's a nightmare, exporting to each and every one. So the growth of our complexity in data sheets and keeping that updated online and so on, it's not logical. So a global harmonized system would take away a lot of bureaucracy and also make it easier for the consumer to knowing exactly that they are buying green products if they think that is what they are getting, and that's not always the case. So I think a better harmonization and banning of solvent-borne products would be a very good move if there is any politicians listening.
Anders, you conveyed a very optimistic message regarding technology as a solution or part of a solution to both sort of anemic economic growth, but also from a sustainability perspective. Is that rightly?
Well, I think I work fundamentally as a kind of interface between business leaders and engineers. That's my kind of the sweet spot where I'm kind of doing helping out. And
we're going to copy that later on.
No, I think the point here is that when you work with engineers, there is always a fundamental can-do approach. Okay, you have a problem. Well, actually, we can start to solve it. And when you talk to software engineers that I tend to work a lot with, they think they can rebuild anything. Give us 5 engineers and we will redo the business system for Audi or for BNP or whatever. And I think that's the fundamental optimistic part of our culture, that you can change and that you can do it through technology, and that there are almost always better technological solutions. And one of the fascinating things with the digital programming world is that you can be very radical in your innovation because it's cheap, but engineers are costly, but it's compared to other sectors, it's cheap, and it's also quite low cost of failing. Because if you do something, you can just reprogram it and rebuild it, and you can go after only a couple of percentage points of your clients and test the products and so forth. So I think when engineering becomes more important, that is fundamentally something optimistic about society. And therefore, I think the whole AI digitalization is something that is going to be fundamentally improving our life. The more engineers we have and the fewer politicians, the better it is.
It could have been a good final closing remark. But Sven, I mean, you and your 2 colleagues today have really sort of proved that technology can make a big difference. Obviously, you from the Nederman, but also, I guess, from your competitors and other corporates. Is that your view as well?
Definitely. I think that, as I said and stated, that industrial production do not have to be part of polluting the air. The solutions are there. It's just a matter of partly political courage to take the decision, harmonizing things, but also as consumers. And I think it's too easy to blame only politicians. It's also we as consumers who has an enormous value. And that our opinions, and that what we see is happening now. The consumer goods companies we are working with, they are extremely more interested in doing the right thing when it comes to pollution or CSR as a total, compared to whoever. now I'm bagging on the steel manufacturers, but they do not really care because they are too far off. They are regulatory driven, whereas you can see consumer goods companies are more opinion driven. They are more scared of the Facebook, the Twitter flow, and so on.
But then you would think that business to consumers, that's where you get the first sort of, their consumers, they react, they post on Facebook and stuff. But the business to business, you sort of see changes in their mindset.
Yeah, especially if they are. We are only doing business to business.
I know.
But if you see the Procter & Gamble's, the Unilevers, they are more afraid of. And you can also take Chinese companies as example. They are more afraid of being caught polluting, doing that than a steel company, because then, it goes into a car, it goes into something else, so it's too far off. So we see the change much faster in those companies. Then I think that if we can pool legislation, information, but I also think that we need to be better in explaining for consumers that there are solutions and there are differences, because there's a lot of false messages or a lack of knowledge and so on.
Bringing us back to Connie's speech about how consumers really change many things, because consumer demand is changing, and also investors. It was really interesting what you referred to AXA, the insurance company, that they've sort of changed their business model.
Some of the big ones on the investor side, they are really changing. And of course, again, it's not that you sometimes say, wow, now everybody is changing. It's not like that. But just take 5 years back. Pension funds, in Denmark, they are huge. In many places, they are getting bigger and bigger. 5 years ago, it was not an issue to no one. Now I saw this Sunday, whole page advertising that now we are divesting from this into that, and you just see it in pension fund after pension fund. And that has got a lot to do with many things, reputational risk. I mentioned this meat consumption dropping. Coop in Denmark says they have never seen habits change this fast. As a rule of thumb, they normally have from the most sort of fashionable quarter in Copenhagen, when consumers start to demand something, it normally, they say, take 5 years until it's out in the most rural part of Denmark. Here with
Which is 5 minutes outside of the
Thank you. That was
Now we're out in Jylland.
That was a very Swedish comment, But this time with the meat, they saw it was in less than 2 years.
Okay.
From the start and they said, we have never seen anything like it. And
So
social media is part of that. And if I could just sort of, Danish Crown this May, an enormous company. This May, they announced we want to be carbon neutral by 2050. That was on a Friday. On the Monday, Arla, the biggest dairy in the Nordic countries, Nordic region, did the same. The CEO of Danish Crown was asked, why didn't you say this 5 years ago? And his answer was very clear. He said, 5 years ago, the demand was not there. And then he added, interestingly, I thought, also not in China. Just meaning it's not something he sees only on his Nordic or North European markets. He also sees it at his very, very big market in China.
That's very, very optimistic. If
it's not optimistic unless we really change things. Yeah.
It changes things, yes. Do we have any questions out here? Please, just wait a second, you'll have a microphone.
Tanja Gibrant from Alumni, the people business. I'm just thinking now, we are about 250 people or so, having the opportunity today to listen to all of these really enlightening, fascinating stories about the change that we can do. How could we get these messages more viral? You, for instance, Henrik, writing for the Swedish Business Daily, or Connie influencing media at a very international rate, Anders as well. How could you help incorporate also there in getting the stories out there? What if we could get a Bona viral story influencing the consumers? Going back to your success stories, how could you get that continuous media environment focus on these really promising and interesting messages instead of these sort of, like you said, negative news? How could you influence that more?
Colin, you've been, sorry, Anders.
So I think what Connie said is extremely valid. I work with a large number of companies in many different sectors, ranging from finance to industry and so forth. And today, when you do the quarterly reports and also the annual reports, all companies are reporting. Everybody has done the same exercise as we saw from Bona and from Nederman. So these are the sustainability goals. We want to work with this, that, and the others, and they are reporting back. We have reduced our energy production. We have reduced our emissions. Our carbon footprint is lower. We have contributed to poverty reduction. We have this done and the others. So I think the business sector, even if there are political backlashes, I think the business sector is taking this extremely serious, because in industry, you do what you can measure. And when you can measure and report back to your investors and to all of these large funds that have demands on ESG and so forth, it becomes a competition. And today, I would say that in any board, this will be an issue. What have we done to reduce our carbon footprint, and what can we do next year? So I think we are seeing, at least from the European business sector, where I spend most of my time, I would clearly say that we're heading quite rapidly in the right direction.
Connie, you and I, during lunch, we talked about media and referring to the question that how to sort of change the media landscape and not just focus on the negatives, but also on some positive
It
aspects.
was because you called me a constructive optimist. I don't know what
That
is,
was
but
no
then,
criticism.
No, I understand.
we got off on the
no,
wrong foot here, but I'm
but
not
that
trying
was-
to criticize
No,
here. I'm
not at
just,
all. That was why
be an optimist. I thought a constructive optimism, isn't that something good?
And that was why I told you about that. I'm on the board of something called constructive journalism, because it's sort of a new kind of thinking within journalism, that journalists cannot just continue just to point at problems and negativity and all this that people sit there and say, wow, that's really a bad world we are living in. So they have to go in and try to look more for the solution,
Yeah.
be constructive, be a channel for people to see where can I act in all this. And I will just only say, yes, policymakers, they have to do a lot here. And some of us have been in this for many years, sort of talking about these things. But as message, you need some new voices, some new centers of this message, and all these options and possibilities and solutions out there. And I would agree with Anders that, of course, a lot of business are doing fantastic stuff. But if I should put it in a too simple, of course, but a bit provocative way, but not many people know about it. And we need that now in order to carry the people's support for the transition we have to go through, because now it's going to be extremely challenging. With all due respect, it was not easy to change the energy system, and we are not done with that yet. But very few of our citizens are interested if they push the light wherever the energy comes from. But when it's about transportation, about your diary, about agriculture, about your house you live in, now it's getting closer to you, not to talk about consumption and behavior. It's getting closer to people. It's a much more challenging political task to get this right. And there is also someone who has to pay a price at some time for this transition, because it's not for free. So that's why I say people need to see, oh, that's interesting. You can do that. Wow, how fascinating. I want to be part of that. I just say it maybe sound very banal, but I think that is what we need now, and that's where there are new stories to be told.
And people don't always get that right off. And what comes to mind is the Vienna Motor Show about 15 years ago, when my colleagues, who I respect at Volkswagen and at Mercedes, stood up in front of a great hall, largely full of my German colleagues, and talked about the new 12-cylinder diesel and the new larger Mercedes sedan. And then partway through, at the end actually, a very small, very diminutive person by chance, who was the CEO of Toyota, came up to the same podium and introduced the Prius. And while there was great applause for the 12-cylinder diesel, the room was silent. No one knew what to do with the Prius. A plug-in a hybrid first vehicle, high mileage, really small. And he quietly walked down and walked away. And of course, that was the beginning of a revolution. So it came at a quiet period, but at the end of the day was quite dramatic.
Sven, now we've talked about Nederman, we talked about your products and the potential going forward. What do you see apart from what you do? What about sort of other companies in your line of business in air pollution? What are they doing?
They're doing what they have always been doing, and if some are very good at filtration, some are very good in capturing and so on, and I think that they will copy. There are there are Chinese not only in China, so probably they will copy what we are doing and what we are trying to do. So again, we will have to spend a few days. How can we speed up? Because we have had some good ideas, I think. We need to make sure and take the advice from Connie here, make people know it, make it known and make sure that we can stay ahead of competition. And again, innovation, as you say, we need to, we need to continue to innovate. We cannot stop. Then we hopefully can have a very happy 100 years anniversary as Bona is having.
Right. And then we're all invited here.
Absolutely, here.
Yeah, on this floor.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a true pleasure. Connie, Robert, Kerstin, Anders, you will have some flowers. We will have some drinks later on. Sven and I will try to conclude the day for a few minutes. Thank you so much.
So much.
Nice job.
Tack så du. You want me to stay?
Sorry?
Jag vill ha mig kvar.
Yeah. Sven, it's been a long day.
Very interesting day.
It has, hasn't it? What did it live up to your expectations?
I think it was overachieving.
Especially
our guest,
Yeah.
prominent guest speakers has given us a lot of insight and a lot of new ideas.
I was thinking about that. Since you arrived 24 hours ago, the Stockholm Stock Exchange is down a bit. But Nederman is up 2%. So that means you add another 80 million to your market cap.
Okay.
So it's been really cheap.
Yeah. So you are negotiating your fee now.
But in order to sort of, I mean, if you go to the management philosophy, you can read about the blue ocean strategies and whatever, and you can conclude that it's always good to think big, act small, and do it now. Are there some takeaways from that for you? Something you're going to do tomorrow? Because you're going to meet all your fellow managers.
Well, I have 85 managers from Nederman, and I expect them to have the clever answers tomorrow. Having now listened to intelligent people telling what the world looks like.
All
now
right.
tomorrow they can tell me what should we do to take advantage of this new world.
Before we end today's session, we have another movie, a fourth and final.
We move.
I pick up a memory. I thought I lost it long ago. Remember the freshness of carefree days we used to know. We live in a new time. Let's sing for the good ones and all the ones we love. We live in a great time. Don't let it slip away. I wish I could take all the worries that you have. a new magic. I would make them smooth and clean. We live in a new time. Let's sing for the good ones and all the ones we love. We live in a great time.
Good stuff. You know, Sven is a very talented man. I mean, this whole video production and your singing, and it's really good.
The problem is the dancing, but
Yeah?
otherwise I'm going to give you
Right.
an example of that.
Yeah. But I think, come to think about the discussions we've had today and about the technical solutions that you provide and the potential consumer power that drives the change in business, shouldn't we go back to Barack Obama? Yes, we can.
I think that's very good. Yes,
Yeah?
we can.
Yes, we can. Retake control. Sven, thank you for today.
Thank you very much.